Hello everyone, this is Iran Talk, and in this video I'd like to take a look at the unholy alliance that has developed between the Iranian mullahs and the imported Mongol Hazaras. In fact, I call on all Iranians to acknowledge the fact that the Hazaras are indeed a Mongol population. What most Iranians need to realize is that the Hazaras are a Mongol population of Mongol descent and are not Iranic, and for this reason they should not be welcomed with open arms to Iran. It's also worth emphasizing the fact that the Iranian regime is utilizing the Hazaras to suppress and oppress Iranians. Now that the mullahs have realized that the Iranian people do not want Islam in Iran, they are utilizing the Hazaras as a demographic tool to genetically and culturally alter the makeup of Iranians, especially with the declining Iranian birth rate. I reckon that in the future the Hazara population will be used as a tool against the Iranian people to suppress them and to suppress any potential revolutions. The Iranian people also need to realize that they have a great degree of genetic continuity to their ancient ancestors, and this will be eroded with these large-scale migrations from Afghanistan and other parts that are currently being occupied by Iranian proxies. Thus, the demographic and genetic character of Iran will play a major role in the future trajectory and destiny of the Iranian people. I will begin this analysis by providing an overview of the Hazaras and their historical relations with the Iranian people. Then I'll take a look at an interesting news article on the demographic replacement that's about to come and change Iran forever. And then finally I'll present genetic evidence corroborating the Mongoloid origins of the Hazara people. By the end of this analysis, you will see that the Hazara people are not Iranian and that they pose a major threat to the future genetic and cultural as well as demographic hegemony of the Iranian people in the Iranian plateau. To begin, here's an image of the Hazaras getting ready to migrate to Iran, and you can see that all of them have a very Mongoloid phenotype which reflects their heavy Mongol ancestry. Now, what you have to realize is that many of these Hazaras are very religious and they migrated to Iran and they openly support the regime, as evident from these two pictures. Here is a zoomed in version of the top image, and you can clearly see that these three Mongol Hazara women are not Iranic or Iranian and have features that are alien to Iran. Here is another image of more Hazaras supporting the Islamic regime, and again, it's usually the Hazaras who are the most staunchest and religious Shia Muslims in Iran. Moving on, here is another image which supports my assertion that the Hazaras are staunch supporters of the Iranian regime. As you can see, the two men at the bottom are of Hazara extraction. In terms of historical relations between the Mongols and the Iranians, one has to look no further back than the early 13th century. It was at this time that nearly all of Iran was united, and Iran was also at its cultural peak. Unfortunately, after 1215, the Mongol ancestors of the Hazars led their relentless assault against the Iranian people. The Mongol assault on the Khwarezmian Empire led to the mass depopulation of Iranian Central Asia and even impacted the urban centers of the Iranian plateau. Unfortunately, the Mongols massacred 90% of the population of Iranian Central Asia and around 50 to 75% of the Iranian plateau's population. And here's an illustration of the Mongol invaders, and you can see that they have a phenotype which very much resembles the Hazara phenotype. Another point that must be emphasized here is that after the Mongols conquered Iran, Iran fragmented into smaller states ruled by Mongol princes, which is rather unfortunate, and this just goes to show how unstable Mongol rule really was. Further invasions of Iran were undertaken by the Mongol prince Tamerlane. These devastations followed the collapse of the Mongol Ilkhanate dynasty and unfortunately led to the deaths of millions of Iranians. Here is an image of the Mongol prince Tamerlane, and you can again see that he has very strong Mongoloid characteristics and does not resemble the modern Iranian. The most notable massacre that Tamerlane inflicted upon the Iranian people was at Isfahan, where he killed around 70,000 to 200,000 Iranians and created a tower out of their skulls. As you saw, historically, the ancestors of the Mongol Hazaras have been at odds with the Iranian people. In fact, the Mongol ancestors of the Hazars were known to have inflicted a great degree of devastation upon the Iranian people. For this reason, the Iranians should not openly welcome the Hazars, and actually there should be a concerted effort to keep them out of the country. That concludes the first phase of this analysis. In the second phase, I will be taking a look at an article from Atlantic Council that takes a look at Shia Afghan migration to Iran. As many of you may already know, the majority of Afghan migrants to Iran are actually from the Shia Hazara community. Now, without further ado, I'd like to begin the second phase of this analysis. The article is titled Shia Afghans are being brought to Iran to make up for the lack of religious Iranians. And at the very top of this article, you can see images of the Mongol Hazara invaders. It is worth mentioning that the article was written by Saeed Golkar and Kasra Arabi. This is the very first part of the article, and what's interesting to note here is that around 100,000 Shia Afghan migrants in the Iranian city of Mashhad participated in state-backed mourning processions to commemorate the death of hardline Islamist President Ibrahim Raisi in late May. What this means is that the Iranian regime utilized the radical Shia element within Afghanistan, which are the Hazaras, to boost their support base. And this is evidence for the regime's nefarious intentions to replace the Iranian people. Furthermore, around 20,000 more Mongols took part in the commemorations of the third Shia saint, Imam Hassan. In response, most Iranians have ridiculed the regime. Furthermore, according to the article, the Mongol Hazaras are widespread across Iran, including in the most obscure rural areas. I reckon that this is purposely being done by the Iranian regime to replace Iranians all across Iran. Thus, the mullahs are indeed guilty of and complicit in the replacement of the indigenous Iranian population. The article goes on to blame the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan as being the primary catalyst for the migration of 3.41 million Afghans to Iran since 2021. The Iranian government has actually given Afghan refugees en masse Iranian passports, national identity cards, and full citizenship rights, including the right to work, vote, and own homes. And this is being done to ensure that the regime can maintain their grip over the country through loyalty from the Afghan migrants. In fact, as mentioned in the article, one Afghan migrant who was given the right to vote was very happy that he had the chance to support the Iranian regime. As you can see, the article then goes on to say that the Hazara migration to Iran is just a part of a strategy employed by the Iranian regime to increase their grip over areas and regions under their influence, such as Iraq and Syria. These demographic changes are a part of Ali Khamenei's grand ideological project for Iran. If you don't already know, Ali Khamenei is the supreme leader of Iran, and he ultimately plans to replace the indigenous Iranians. The ultimate goal of Iranian demographic replacement is to push Iran towards an Islamic society that is dominated by Islam in all aspects. This is against the will of the true Iranian people who are against Islam and want Islam out of their country. In fact, Khamenei believes that a true Islamic society can only be created under an Islamic government. And the election of Raisi was the first step in this process. Thus, the regime is moving towards a radical Islamization of Iran through the importation of millions of foreigners, particularly Shia Hazaras. This Islamization has been going on since the Iranian Revolution, and what's interesting to note is that it's been achieved through setting up mosques in various neighborhoods across Iran, even in the most obscure places, as well as the establishment of the Basij. These Basij are radical elements within Iran and are known to oppress the Iranian people. Furthermore, Iranians today are very secular, as 73% want a secular state. And many have been burning their hijabs, burning the Quran, as well as turban tossing to insult the mullahs, and I think this is a good thing, and Iranians must continue to do this. Thus, Iranians need to stand up against the mullah threat to Iranian society, especially the demographic character of Iran. The article goes on to say that this Islamization of Iran can only be achieved through Islamization from the outside. and this is being done to strengthen the grip of the Iranian regime over Iranian society. The article then states that the demographic changes within Iran are not a pipe dream for the supreme leader, but rather a genuine possibility that is within reach. There are currently 6 million Afghans in Iran, and this will increase to 20 million in the next 3 years if current migration trends continue. Thus, what's evident here is that the Iranian regime is indeed attempting to replace the indigenous Iranian population with the Mongol Hazaras of Afghanistan. In fact, when the Mongols came to Iran in the 12th century, they were only a small part of the population, whereas now these Mongol Hazaras that are migrating to Iran are much larger in number and much more devastating. And this is especially compounded by the fact that Iran's birth rate has declined to 1.66 in 2022 from 6.4 in 1980. And this is in spite the fact that the regime has attempted to provide incentives to increase Iran's natural birth rate. Unfortunately, now the regime is importing millions of Hazara Mongols to remedy this issue. And this is facilitating mass demographic changes within Iran, as in the fall of 2022, out of 300 births in a hospital in Fars province, 294 were Afghan. As per the article, the regime is in fact attempting to utilize the Hazaras to increase public participation among the Iranian population in religious festivities as opposed to Islamic ones. And this was especially true in Mashhad, where on Nowruz, Hazara Mongols gathered to commemorate the passing of the 8th Shia Imam. Thus, the Hazaras are indeed being used as a tool against the Iranian population, which is rather sad and unfortunate. The article also touches on the question of morality and how these Shia Hazara Mongols are being integrated into Iranian society in an attempt to make it look more religious, in contrast to the reality that most Iranians are not religious. The final reason presented for the mullah's decision to import millions of Afghans is that they want to increase the support base of the IRGC through one of its proxies known as the Fatimiyu Brigade. This proxy consists almost entirely of Hazara volunteers, and actually they have been very busy fighting for the Iranian regime in both Syria and Iraq. This is very unfortunate and shows how the IRGC as well as the Iranian regime are benefiting from the Hazara Mongol invasion of Iran. This invasion is the third Mongol invasion of Iran after the initial Mongol conquest of the nation as well as the Timurid invasion. The article also mentions that while this invasion may bring short-term gains for the regime, nonetheless in the long term it will just increase tensions between the heavily secular Iranian population and the incoming religious Hazara Mongols who are extremist Shiites. Thus, the third Mongol invasion of Iran is ongoing, and if it continues, it will cause great problems for the Iranian people. To conclude the article, the authors discuss the ramifications of this migration for the future of Iran. According to them, if the mullahs can somehow control this invasion, then they will have a better chance of preserving the Islamic Republic, undercutting the widely held belief that the modernization and secularization of society will inevitably lead to the collapse of the regime. In contrast, if this project unravels, then there will be chaos and there will be an increasing resistance to the suppression of the Iranian people by the mullahs. And either way, domestic instability within Iran is about to get much worse. Overall, the article does well to highlight the threat posed to Iranian society by the third Mongol Hazara invasion. That is essentially it for my analysis of the article. Up next, I will be taking a look at the genetic origins of both the Iranians of today as well as the Hazaras. The focus here will primarily be on Iranian populations such as the Persians as well as the Mazandaranis, the Gilakis, and the Alurs. I will not be taking a look at the genetic origins of the Kurds and the Azerbaijanis as well as the Bandaris and the Baluchis, as those populations are a bit more mixed compared to the general Iranian population. What you will be able to see is that modern day Iranians have a great degree of genetic continuity, whereas the Hazaras are mostly a Turco-Mongol population with little to do with actual Iranians and thus are not Aryans or Iranians. Now, without further ado, I'd like to begin the genetic analysis. The calculations will be done utilizing Davidsky's Global 25 calculator. Here are the source populations I will be using, and you can see that there's an Andronovo source, an Iran Chalcolithic source, a Bronze Age Caucasian source, a classical Hellenic source, a late antiquity Arabian source, a medieval Turkic source, a medieval Mongol source, an Indus Valley Bronze Age source, a modern Caucasian source, and a sub-Saharan African source. I have decided to include this analysis because I want Iranians to see that they are largely contiguous, unlike the Hazara Mongols, who are primarily of Mongol descent. Here are the results for the aforementioned contemporary Iranians. They are on average 60.5% Iran Chalcolithic, 17.8% Androno, 5.1% Late Antique Arab, 4.9% Indus Valley Bronze Age, 4.7% Bronze Age Caucasian, 4.1% Classical Hellene, 2.2% Medieval Turkic, 0.6% Medieval Mongol, and 0.1% Sub-Saharan African. With these results, you can see that contemporary Iranians are primarily of Iran Chalcolithic and Andronovo descent with only minimal foreign ancestry. In terms of genetic continuity, Iranians derive around 78% of their ancestry from an Iran Chalcolithic and an Andronovo source, and an additional 4.7% from a Bronze Age Caucasian source, for around 83% ancient Iranian ancestry. And even if the focus is just on Iran Chalcolithic and Andronovo ancestry, the continuity is 78.3%. In fact, when only considering these two components, the continuity exceeds 80% in more than half of the sample sets. Thus, contemporary Iranians are indeed primarily of ancient Iranian descent. In contrast, here are the Hazara results, and you can see that they're primarily of Turco-Mongol descent. The Hazaras are on average 56.6% medieval Mongol, 17.6% medieval Turkic, 12.2% Indus Valley Bronze Age, 5.8% Iran Chalcolithic, 4.8% Bronze Age Caucasus, and 3.0% Andronovo. These results prove that the Hazaras are a mixed population and have minimal Iranian ancestry, as you can see that their Iran Chalcolithic ancestry is only at 5.8% and their Andronovo ancestry is only at 3.0%. And what this means is that the Hazaras are an incompatible population that should not belong in Iran and that should stay in their homeland in Hazarajat. These results also show that if Afghan migration to Iran continues, then the Iranian population will largely be replaced by a Turco-Mongol one. And this is the ultimate end goal of the mullahs' complicity in the replacement of the indigenous Iranian element, both genetically and culturally. To conclude, this analysis took a look at an article which focused on the third Mongol invasion of Iran. What was proven is that this invasion is being facilitated by the mullahs who want to alter the demographic character of Iran. If this invasion continues, then Iranians will disappear in their own homeland and will largely be replaced by a Turco-Mongol population. This is especially unfortunate for the Iranian people who have in the past resisted Mongol invasions, two of them that came and that wrought a great degree of destruction on the Iranian people. Though I would say that this current Mongol invasion of Iran is the worst, as we've never seen historically this many Mongols in Iran. I do, however, feel that Iranians can overcome this third Mongol invasion and expel the foreigners and also overthrow the government through strong resistance. If Iranians manage to succeed in this regard, then the future of Iran is bright. That is essentially it for this analysis. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.